not having a good time with this material.
Okay. With the labs or with functions or with is there? Okay. Yeah.
I kind of felt like I was understanding functions.
Okay.
But I'm just not grasping it, the entire concept of JavaScript. So
yep.
I asked some people if there was like other things that they used, so maybe I could hear it from some different angles.
Yeah, which is incredibly important. You really have to do that.
So some things that they sent were, let's see, since it's a long weekend, I'll have a lot of time to sit with these things. Learn-js.org.
Maybe. Nope, never seen this before. Looks interesting though. Brings you through a bunch of tutorials.
There's Udemy. I know Charles, we were talking about Udemy.
Yeah, Udemy is a pretty common, just code academy, place to go watch things online.
Yeah.
Pluralsight is another one that's like Udemy.
They said eloquent JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
And then some girls sent me some stuff, some videos, and some stuff from GitHub. You don't know JavaScript.
Yeah. And then, yeah, W3 schools. And then, honestly, the biggest thing that I can tell you is if you want to learn how to code, you have to have a project and a desire to complete. And so, like, if there is a particular thing that you want to try to accomplish, or if you just want, again, like a to-do list, creating a to-do list in JavaScript is actually, it exercises all of the pieces. And so just sitting down and trying to make it work, and when you can't get it to work, just Googling and Googling and reading and Googling and reading and Googling is the best thing that you can do. And just copy and paste code and try it, and if it doesn't work, it doesn't matter, right? It's just code.
Which one did you say?
Pluralsight and then W3 schools. That's what Pluralsight is.
Yeah, I have a coding challenge that I can use to see if I can just work with that.
Yeah, but the biggest thing, right, is, and that's my one concern with like learn-js.org, is they're going to have expectations, much like learn.co does, that you do things in a particular way. And it doesn't matter all that much how you do it, as long as you can get it done. And that's usually the first step, is you just want to see that it functionally does the thing that you want it to do, and then you can expand upon it from there. So it is much better generally to just play around with something that you understand, which is something like a to-do list or something that you know, like, these are the business rules, this is how this should work. I just need to keep iterating until I can get it to actually work, as opposed to just doing what they tell you to do. And that's part of, too, like me, when I'm teaching up here, it's not enough, because it all looks well and good when I'm doing it, because I get it right most of the time, not every time, but most of the time. So it seems fine and it seems simple, but when you go to actually do it yourself, then it's not, it doesn't feel that way anymore.
Yeah.
And it will feel that way over time, but you have to like struggle and press and, you know, try again and again and again. So, but
that's all I have to do this weekend. So.
Oh, good. Yes, maybe we'll have some time. Yeah. So given that, let's go ahead and try to continue with our to-do list example. Today's class is largely about understanding conditionals, and so we'll have some examples of that. But let's go back to where we were last time and see if we can understand how we get to the point of creating a task. Okay. So I have this basic to-do list creator. Do you want to come over here just because? So I have this basic to-do list creator, right? So when I type something into my input, it shows up inside of our list. Do you remember how we did this? Like how to get started doing something like this?
I know the code is append.
Append is a function that we created. Yeah, so I'm actually going to start back from scratch, and we're just going to do it all over again so that we can get the experience of seeing how that happens. Okay. All right, so if we go back to the page, it should be blank. There's nothing there. So we're going to recreate our to-do list creator. So where would we start? What's the first thing that we need to do?
What's the end goal? Sorry.
What's that?
What's the end goal?
The end goal is that to-do list creator, where I have an input that I can type into, and when I click create task, it creates the next one. Yep. So we can just start really basic.
Unordered list.
So we need an unordered list. Yeah, so let's just start with the UI, right? So let's create an unordered list. Okay. And then that does something in that there is inside of our code, inside of the HTML, there's an unordered list, but it doesn't actually, there's nothing in it, so you don't see anything, right? Okay, so what's the next thing we need to do?
You need a button.
So we need a button. So let's go ahead and create a button. And we're going to just put create task. Just put create. Alright, so we have a button. Okay, what else?
Input field.
An input field. So what does that look like? So I put input, and then what are some of the attributes that I'm going to need? You can search Google. It's just what's that?
Submit.
So submit would usually go on a button if we had a form. With JavaScript, you don't typically do that because we're going to use event listeners to listen to when the button gets clicked.
Type.
So yeah, so type,
Which is text.
And what's that going to do?
That.
What if I put like radio here instead of type?
It would be the one we click.
It'll be like a button that you click, right? So text is just saying, hey, I want a text input field. I want to be able to type text, a small little text input field. Okay. Yep. So there's our input and our button. Okay, but obviously when I type and click create, nothing happens, right? So what's the next step?
Do you want to go to JS and start automating that?
Yeah, so we can start playing around with our JavaScript. So what are some of the things we need?
Is this where append comes in? Or
What's that?
is this where the append comes
Append would go here.
Okay. Yeah.
So what's the first thing we need to do? Like, let's just start very basically. We can't do anything, right, unless we've added an event listener to our button, right? So we need to be able to click. We need to say when we click on the button, we need to do something, which is to take the text out of the text input and then put it into the unordered list. We can't do anything until we get there. So how do we create an event listener on our button?
Okay.
And you guys can totally cheat. I mean, you can search for how to create a to-do list in JavaScript, how to create a quick event on button, anything. But
So you put document dot get element by ID.
yep. And then what do I put inside a?
Inside of there, you have. I'm not sure if you have to name this. I'm not sure how this is named.
Yeah, so let's talk about what does document.getElementById by ID do?
It searches the document for the ID that you made.
Yeah, it searches the document for what exactly? So it's gonna. So our document is our HTML. So it's gonna search our document for what?
Just like a certain word or
It's the ID.
ID.
So is it button?
So okay.
So let's remember.
It's,
What is an ID? Remember back to CSS.
ID is like a single thing.
ID is a single thing, so it's usually a single element. Well, we apply an ID.
So it only applied to a certain element.
Yeah.
A single one. It's
So-
past.
right. So
Yeah.
you have to name an ID first, right?
Yeah. So where do we put that?
Do you put it on the button or yeah? Okay.
Yeah. So you put it on the button, right? Because what we're saying right now is we're gonna say,
Okay.
right? We're saying the element of button has an ID of create button. By the way, we could do class of create button or whatever. ID is just useful because it is a single element that exists on the page. Everybody gets that?
Yeah.
Not doing anything special. You could put blue equals create button here actually. It would be a lot harder to select it because the selectors aren't very easy to find an attribute that's not ID or class or something. But you can do whatever you want inside of those elements. So we're going to put ID because that's an easy thing to hold on to, and it's called create button. Right. So now what do we put inside of here?
Create button.
Yeah. Do we put quotes around it?
Yes.
Why do we put quotes around it?
This is a reference to the HTML.
Nope. So what if I didn't put quotes around it? What does JavaScript think create button is?
Oh, yeah.
A variable.
A variable. So actually we could do it this way, but then we have to actually set our variable to be the string of create button.
Okay, there was something in the Learn Dash code that said that I can't remember what it is, but there is something that you cannot or you should not put underscores. You should write it.
Yeah. So variables in JavaScript are usually written in what's called camel case.
Okay.
Which
so
is
just variables, not the rest.
Functions and variables are written in camel case. So like you see here, get element by ID is written in camel case. And that's a variable. Variables are used for substitution. So create button has been set to this create button, which is the same as doing this. And I'm just going to leave it there for simplicity. But that's why we do. Well, that's why we find it by the string. Okay, so this is going to go and it's going to find our button, right? We're finding our button. So this is in JavaScript the equivalent of in our DOM this button, right? Everybody sees how that's true?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now, what do I need to do next? So I want to add an actual event listener so that I listen to when we click on that button. I want to write code then after that.
Dot.
Mm-hmm.
Add event listener.
Yep.
And it's listening for
Click.
notation.
Yep. And then what am I still missing?
Do you put the behavior after that?
Yep.
So comma. And what do we want it to do?
So we're gonna want it to take whatever we type into here, and when we click create, we want it to show up in the list.
So is it this way?
It's whatever you want.
Okay.
Yeah. So in our case, let's just say add, because we're gonna add a task, right?
Okay.
Okay.
So in this, get element by ID and add event listener are functions.
They're functions that are available on the document
Okay.
Object. So document is an object in JavaScript that references everything that's inside of your HTML, and it has a bunch of functions available to it. So document has a get element by ID function that's available, and then an element, right? So now we've found, So at this point, we have our button before this dot. So once we have our element, then we're going to add an event listener to the element because an element has an add event listener.
Okay.
In other words, I could say something like b equals, which is our button, and then I could do b dot add event listener because our button element has an add event listener function.
Okay. And are there other functions that are available to the document?
Yep. So like we could say b dot, and you can actually, my IDE is helping finish. So there's blur, there's click, there's dir, there's drag drop, there's focus, there's hidden, there's offset, there's all these things are available on the element. The other way to see this if your IDE doesn't work is you can either put a debugger in. Yeah, actually that's the way to do it. So you put a debugger in right after, and now if we refresh, we'll see that we stop right here, and we can hover over B, and it shows you all the functions that are available.
I see.
You can also go look them up, like just search Google for what functions are available to an element in JavaScript.
Okay.
Okay, so, but we were right, we had our event listener has been added. We're looking for a click, and then when we click on it, we want it to add. So what is add?
Add, what do you mean?
What is it? Like, so right there, we wrote the word add, but like, what is that? What do we do with that?
You want to incorporate it into the UL.
So we want to, when the behavior of add behavior is described, which is fine, that's a good way of looking at it. We somehow have to actually add to the UL, right? So if I refresh the page right now, let's just do that. You see we get an uncaught reference error, add is not defined. Okay, so what is add? Why did we write that? What is the purpose of that? Let me back up a second. If I remove add, let's just read what this sentence says, right? So this says document.getElement by ID create button, right? So what does that do?
Search the document for the ID, the element with the ID create button.
Correct. So now we have that element, which is our button, and then we do dot add event listener click. What does that do?
When you find that element that has that ID, listen for a click.
Listen for a click on that element. Yep. But then what?
And then we want it to add to the list.
Then we want it to add to the list, right? So how do we actually add it to the list?
I'm not sure if you, I know that you have to use append, but I'm not sure if you start append by, because you need to define a variable, don't you?
You're probably going to want to define a variable. So let's start in a different way then. So, okay, this is how we add an event listener click to a button, right? At some point when we click, we need to execute a set of code, right? So what is the set of code that we're going to execute when we click on the button?
The set of code that you're going to execute when you click on the button.
So somewhere I need to write code, right? Should I start writing code down here? Should I start writing code up here? Or do I need to do something else to get started?
Does it not matter where it is?
Does matter incredibly. So let's try this. Let's skip the whole click button thing for a moment. We'll come back to that in a second. How do we add an item to our list in JavaScript? So we're not even gonna, let's just start with this. Let's just replace what's inside of the unordered list with something, hello world. How would we do that?
In JavaScript.
In JavaScript, yep. And again, you can search, it's totally fine. I know this exercise is like slow and painful, but I think it's going to be incredibly instructive. This is how you work through these issues. You have to not be given the answers, you have to like go find them. And by the way, this is what I do all day, every day. I hit a problem, I don't know how to do it. I go search the internet, we go find a way to do it. Yep. So all we want to do is,
So, but do you need the list in HTML first?
so the list is in HTML, right? So we have our unordered list in HTML.
It's just,
Okay, but you don't need to like put the rest, the li tags.
We don't have to put the li tags in.
Okay.
Let's even try a different way to make it even simpler. So if I have a div, or let's make it even simpler than that. If I want to replace all of the HTML inside a body so that there's no longer a button or an input, how do I change it to be hello world?
like, say more.
Yeah, so body,
Yeah,
right?
it's in the body, yeah.
So if we go inspect the element and we look at what body is, body currently has all this HTML inside of it, right? We have a UL, we have an input, we have a button, right? We can see all that. But what if I, in JavaScript, want to just replace all of the HTML that's inside a body with hello world?
Do you have to remove it first? Do you have to remove the UL first?
I just want to replace it. Just try to search for, like, how do you set HTML in JavaScript? How to replace HTML in JavaScript, something.
And this is written in JavaScript.
Mm-hmm.
Document.get element by ID.
Hey, it's something.
The ID that you're looking for is body.
Yeah. What if I change this to blue? What's the ID to it?
ID is blue.
Okay. Yep.
Dot inner HTML. Equal sign.
Yep.
New HTML. That's what it says.
Like this? Oh, it just says the words new HTML. So what it's saying is, but is it in quotes?
Yeah.
Okay. What it's saying is you put your HTML here. So we're just
in quotes, put what you would want
Yeah.
it to say.
our old HTML. When I click that button, it gets replaced with hello world. Okay? So that's how we replace HTML. So let's just start with that. Okay? So now, let's say that when I click on the button, I want to replace the HTML with hello world. How do we do that?
So, should we now put dot inner HTML at the end of it?
But I only want to do it when we click on it. We saw that like it happens immediately, right? So I only want to do it when we click on it. So how do we make it so that when I click on the button, there's one piece that we're missing. So if you look up add event listener in Google, what does it tell you about add event listener?
Okay, let's see. Do we need a function?
We need a function.
Yes.
Where does that go?
After click.
After click. So what do we put? What are we going to put after click then?
So in this case, I'm not sure what you guys are talking about. But
Yeah.
We name the function even before we create it.
Yeah. So we don't have a function yet. So we could name the function first. So how do we do that?
Function.
What are we doing here? Hello world.
Yeah, so all we're really trying to do right now is replace the body HTML with hello world.
The function could be H world.
Yeah, H world. Let's just say hello. Just, okay.
And then next to click, then should you put that?
Yeah, well, I mean, okay. Like that, or and what am I missing up here?
Oh, you want to finish your function up there, so.
So
Friends.
yeah, so what does a function look like? What are the missing pieces here for a function? So you write the word function, and then you write the name of your function, and then you do need curly braces, but what comes even before that? Parentheses. Yeah, and so we can look this up, right? Like JS function. JS, by the way, it's about like just copy and paste what it is right there, right? Doesn't. You can just take it exactly like that, and then you can modify from there. You know that that's good code because you're copying from somewhere like Mozilla. Firefox knows what they're doing with JavaScript. Just copy and paste it. So we can even start right there. Okay. So we have a function which they called myfunc that takes a parameter of object and then sets its brand to Toyota. Whatever. It's fine. Okay. So what if my function is the name of my function? Then, and this is say hello, what's the problem?
That you have not, it won't recognize that function.
It won't recognize that function. So we can either change this to be my func, or we can change this to be say hello. Right? So let's just change this to be say hello. And there we go. So the IDE recognizes that our function's there. Okay. So what's going to happen now if I click on our button?
It will.
So let's just go look. So if I start, so I'm going to click our button, right? What happened? Nothing, but kind of something actually. So one of the best ways to start to figure out what's going on is, okay, I'm clicking on the button, nothing's happening. I'm pretty sure that if I click on the button that it's going to execute this function, right? So what can we put inside of this function to see if it's ever getting here?
Debugger.
So we can put a debugger in right here. All right. So now we refresh the page, nothing happens. If I click create, there we go. Okay, so I get to here, and that's great. And my object at this point is actually an event, but so we do have an object, and it is going to set the object's brand to be Toyota. But we're not console logging that out anywhere. We're not doing anything with it, so it appears as if nothing's happening. Right? So we don't want to set the object brand to be Toyota. What do we actually want to do? We want to write hello world onto the screen. So how do we do that? We were doing this before, remember? How did we make hello world show up on the screen just a minute ago?
We set the inner HTML.
Yep, we set the inner HTML. Of what?
What?
Of what? We set the inner HTML of what? So what's the code that I need to write here? It's on the screen.
Is it
So document. So document.innerHTML. So we can do this. So document.innerHTML equals what?
Hello.
Hello world in quotes, right? Now we can do that. Click create. Doesn't quite work. So what are we missing? Do we really want to reset the entire document to be hello world? We really want to set the body to be hello world, right? Or another div to be hello world. So what do we need to do to find a particular element?
A particular element.
So I want to reset. I don't want to set the inner HTML of document. I want to reset the inner HTML of body in our case.
So would you say like, or you would grab it by the ID blue, right?
You get it by the ID of blue, right? So we just
like element. So would you say the element equals the document?
So we're going to say document. How do we get an element by ID?
Get element by ID.
Yeah, we have a couple of examples right here on the page. So document.get element by ID, and then what goes inside of there? Blue. In quotes, right? And then that dot inner HTML. So we're going to reset this element's inner HTML to be hello world, which is just the body. Okay? So when we refresh, create, it's hello world. Okay. Everybody gets that ish?
Yeah, but that's not adding it to a list.
That's not adding it to a list. So a lot of times when you're working through a problem, you don't know, like there's 15 things that you're trying to get to. A lot of times it's useful to just like, let me just see if I can do this piece, and then we'll go to the next piece, and then the next piece, small pieces of iteration to actually get all the way there. Okay, so we got it so that when I click, it becomes hello world. It's not quite what I want to do. Let's make it so that instead of it resetting the entire body to be hello world, I reset my list, my unordered list to be hello world. How do I do that? So here's our list, and really instead of, so right now what's happening is all of this gets turned into hello world when we click the button, right? I don't want that to happen. I just want what's inside of here, which is empty currently. I want that to say hello world.
So you would select the element, the UL, and then create a child, create another list item element, I would say.
So for now, let's just replace the HTML. Like we're going to do the same thing that we did to body, but we're going to do it to the UL. So how do we do that?
We need to put an ID on UL.
So let's put an ID on UL, and we're just going to call it what?
List.
Sure, list. Doesn't matter, right? It's whatever we want it to be. Okay. So if I come back over here, how do I change my code so that we reset the HTML of list instead of the HTML of body?
Change the ID on the function to list instead of body.
Yep. So let's try that. Sweet. Right?
Is there a period?
No, there's no period. Why is there no period?
It's not a list item.
Because it's not a list item. It's just the words, right? All we did was make the words hello world. So there's no LI in there. So one way to fix that is because we're setting the HTML, we can actually just put an LI. We're going to see that's not necessarily the best way, but see, so now it looks like a list item. Okay. So let's see. So the next step is I don't want it to say hello world, right? I want it to say whatever I type into this box. So how do I make that happen?
You don't want to add it to the list, you want to replace it.
For now, I just want to replace it.
Okay.
Yeah. So the first thing is we're seeing a pattern here, right? We keep grabbing elements and then doing stuff with them. Right? So the first thing is we need to get access to our input element. Right? So how do we do that?
So you need to put an ID on input.
Yep. So let's start by putting an ID on input. I'll just call it text. Okay. Or actually, let's call it task because it's really a new task. It's really a very new task. Okay. So, what do I need to do to get access?
So list with new tasks.
So what's that going to do?
It's gonna get
That's
where did we just put the new task ID on button?
We put the new task ID on the input item because we want to be able to get access to where we're typing.
So it's gonna get the input item.
It's going to get the input item and then
replace it.
it's going to replace its inner HTML with hello world. But do we want to do that?
Or we just want to get whatever they type.
We just want to get what they type, right? So I'm going to put list back for a moment. So how do I get what they type? How do I get the value from an input field in JavaScript? And Shane, you can cheat. We're going to go through this exercise. I'm going to try to just give a little bit of guidance and let it get worked through so you can Google or whatever. But
You said,
how do we get the value? Right? How do I get what I typed into here? That's really what I want to know. So inside of JavaScript, how do I get the text in an input text box?
Okay. Get element by ID. Put the. Can you put? You said that we're not gonna put that ID.
Well, I just don't want to.
Yes.
We
put
can
the ID.
put it here.
Yes.
Okay.
And then change dot inner HTML
Okay.
to dot value.
Okay. So what's that gonna do? Do I want to leave it like this?
You want to remove the hello world then, right?
Yeah.
Ye-
If you remove the hello world and just put
Okay. Just so we understand, what is this doing? The way that it's written right now, what does that do?
It's taking the value that you put in and setting it to hello world.
Yeah. So it's replacing it with
Yeah.
hello world, right? So if let's just start there. Okay. So click create. Boom. Look at that. The value became hello world. That's an interesting thing. It's not what we're trying to do, but it's an interesting thing that happens.
It's pretty cool.
Okay. So we don't want to set the value though, we want to get the value, right? So let's remove that, okay? So now if I want to make the list have inner HTML of whatever the value is, how do I do that? I'm just going to bring something back for a second. Shakara, watch this. So right there, we're setting the inner HTML of list, right? And we're setting it to hello world. But we don't want to set it to hello world. We want to set it to the value of the input item. So how do we so these two pieces of code are both important, right? We need both of them. So how do we do that? How do we set the inner HTML of list equal to the value of the new task input item? So I'm going to put both of them on the screen instead of just having one. Okay, so and that's important. When you have one piece working, don't remove it. Leave that piece and then try to get the other pieces to add in with it. Okay, so I'm going to copy that. So there's our value, and there's us setting the inner HTML. So again, we don't want this to be hello world. We want it to be this value.
So should we put it equal to new task dot value? Well, that value?
So we want to set what equals, what do I need to move?
The hello world and replace it with the first line.
Yeah, so we want to replace hello world with the first line. Does everybody see why?
replace hello. Okay.
Right, so I want to replace that with this.
Okay.
Why did we do that?
Because here you're saying that you're going to search the document to get the element with an ID of list.
Yep.
And then you want to set that element's inner HTML to
Yep.
whatever is there when you search the document with the element of the ID of new task. And that's value.
Yes. That's exactly right. Okay. That's exactly right. So if we refresh and I type test and I click create, boom. Okay? Pretty sweet. Now, that's nice. We lost a couple things. So one thing is we lost our bullet. Right? So we could use what's called concatenation to get the bullet back. Anybody know how to do that? Yeah. When
You want to use it with the actual, you want to use it with the list item or
Yeah.
the actual bullet?
I want to put the list item, yeah.
So with the list item tag, and then a plus and a quotation, right?
It's going the other way. So what you put in quotes is the thing that's not a variable. So we put in quotes
Oh, the list item.
the list item, and then we add to that the value, which returns to us a string, which is whatever the value of the text box is. And then we add to that the closing li. Okay. That's called concatenation. What we're doing is taking multiple strings and bringing them all together. So it's
Like first name, last name.
like first name, last. That's right, exactly. So it's gonna the resulting string is going to be li, whatever we type into the input box, closing li. Okay. So if we refresh now. There we go. Okay, and we can actually see it, right? So inside of there, now it's an li. Okay. All right. So that technically does add a list item in, but how do I add another list item in?
You're still using that method?
So we're going to use the same say hello method. We're going to replace what's inside of say hello essentially with adding a. So we need to, right now what we're doing, right, is we're replacing the HTML of the unordered list with
But if you want
this.
to add a list item,
But if instead of replacing we want to add, how do we do
shouldn't
that?
you create the element, a list item element, and then append it?
Yes, so we need to create a list item element and then append it,
Which you did last class.
which is what we did last class, yeah. So how do we do that?
So do we need to create the, do we need to put the list tag in the HTML?
Well, no, because then it's not dynamically created.
Okay.
Right, so we want JavaScript to, because we want it when we click, we want one item and then another item and then another item and then, because right now, right, when I click create, it just replaces the HTML. It doesn't add another one, right? So how do I?
Once you find the list,
Mhm.
the ID, I'm sorry,
Yeah.
you want to then create the li is equal to what is it? The create element, li again.
Yeah.
Did I say that right?
You have to be more specific. So yeah, so just I think you're on the right path, but what do I need to type?
Li
Okay.
is equal to
Yep.
is it create element?
It is create element, but that's not quite the syntax. So you can either look at your notes or you can search Google
Oh, document.create element.
document.create element.
You always gotta let you know where it is.
Mm-hmm.
And then in parentheses, list item again.
Li and string, right? So does this need to be li? What if I named it blueberry? Does it matter?
No,
No. Why doesn't it matter?
because you're creating a list item element, but you can name it whatever you want.
Yeah, because this is just a variable. I'm
Yeah.
setting my variable, whatever it's named.
Yeah.
It could be raspberry, purple, doesn't matter. We're setting our variable equal to a new element that we're creating that is going to be an li element. Okay.
Okay. So, but you don't have to type variable. You don't have to type VA.
You don't. So
If you type, that's a good question. If you typed var blueberry,
Yep.
it would be the same.
it would be exactly the same. And in fact, as you start to go through these lectures now, you're going to see that there's var and that there's let and there's const.
Yeah. And you're saying you should not use var.
Should not use var anymore.
I almost stopped reading at that point.
Yeah.
They told me not to use var. I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. This goes against everything I've learned.
So the reason is that it's a new thing. It's just to try and help you when you're programming not to make mistakes. The idea is if you are creating a variable that you don't plan on resetting, so you just want to set it one time and one time only, and then you just want to use it, you do const. If it's a variable that you do want to reset, so like if I want to, so variable is going to start as the li element, but I want to then change it to a div element, then I use let. That is a nice thing. As a developer, you should probably do that. It's a little bit confusing and doesn't give you anything. Like, it's exactly the same as this, unless you don't have to know rules for. So that's why we've been creating the variables this way. That makes sense?
Okay.
So we're going to keep with this just because I think it's a simpler way and we don't have to worry about it. The reason, it really, it's just that if you define something as a constant, which suggests that you were trying to make it a constant all the time, const, and you try to redefine it later on, it'll tell you can't do that. But most likely, all that means is you want to change const to let because you do actually want to redefine it. So it's not that useful. Anyway, it becomes more useful in type languages and stuff. Anyway, all right, so we have Blueberry, and Blueberry is creating a new element that is an li element, right? So that's cool. But what does that do? Is that going to put an li element into my HTML?
No.
No. Why not?
All we're doing here is just creating the element, but we haven't told it to do anything with the element.
Yeah, we haven't told it to append it or place it in the HTML anywhere. We're creating it in what's called memory. So it exists in the browser knows about it, JavaScript knows about it, but we haven't told it to place it into the HTML yet. Okay. So the first thing we want to do, but at the same time, even though it's not actually in our HTML, this is exactly the same as what we're doing with document.getElement by list. This is an element, right? Document.getElement by ID list is an element, which is our UL element. Document.getElement by ID create button is an element, which is our button element. Document.getElement by ID new task is an element, which is our input element, right? When we do document.createElement li, we have the exact same functions available to us that we do on these other elements, okay? So we can, for example, say blueberry.innerHTML equals, okay? So let's go ahead and do that. So thanks.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
And we want to set that equal to the value.
If we just set that to a string right now, on the refresh, it would just show, right?
Say that one more time.
Oh, I'm sorry. If we just set that to a string right now, so if we just set blueberry.innerHTML is equal to hey Sam.
Yep.
Once we click create without even putting anything in the box, it would have said hey Sam, right?
So let's do that first. Let's just set it to hey Sam for a minute, explicitly. If I refresh the page and click create, we don't actually see hey Sam anywhere. We're still going to see whatever we put into our input box happening. And that's because we still have this line of code, right?
Yeah.
The reason why we don't see hey Sam anywhere is that you just said it, Shannon, a minute ago. Blueberry doesn't show up anywhere, the li doesn't show up anywhere in our HTML because we still haven't placed it into the HTML anywhere. We have updated one of its attributes, which is the inner HTML, to be hey Sam, but we haven't actually, once we append it, then it'll show up because then we're saying, okay, now place it into our HTML at a particular point.
Yeah, go back to, okay, I see.
So I can show you in the debugger that at least when we click create, we do have, and you can see this is all those functions that we were seeing before for our elements, right? It is just like all the other elements that are actually in our HTML currently, It's just that we've only built it in memory, so it doesn't show up anywhere in our HTML.
Mm-hmm.
And then we set its inner HTML to be "Hey Sam," which is true. It's just that we haven't actually placed it into our list yet. So how do we place this into our list?
Okay. Blueberry dot append child.
That's close. So think about what that's doing, right? We want to put our blueberry list item into our UL, right? If you do blueberry.append child, what you're suggesting is I want to put something inside of the LI.
Right. So li dot append child.
Similar issue. So what we want to do.
Sorry, I meant to say UL.
Okay, yeah. So we want to append our inner HTML onto our UL element. So how do we do that? So remember, our UL element has an ID of list.
Okay.
So we want to append onto that element a child of blueberry.
List dot
Append child.
append child.
Is it so? What is a list?
Is that the
Well, go back to the HTML very quickly.
So our UL has an ID of list,
Oh, but that's your ID and not the actual element.
but not the actual element,
Okay.
right? So if I want to append something onto the element, how do I do that?
It's the element dot append child, right?
It is the element.append child, but how do I get the element? Because if I just start typing element, what is an element? Element's a variable, right? But it doesn't exist anywhere. So there are some keywords that exist in JavaScript, and that's an important thing for us to differentiate. Document seems to come out of nowhere, right? It just exists. And the reason it exists is because the browser makes it available through its JavaScript library. Okay, so that's why we happen to be able to do document. Most of the time, that's not true. Okay, so document is a keyword where it's available to us, it's made available to us by the browser, by JavaScript. Element is not a thing. Okay, we haven't created a variable called element. So element doesn't do anything because element is nothing yet. So again, how do I, so if I want to do something with an element, we've done this like 5 times now. If I want to do something with an element, what's the first thing that I need to do? I need to search the document and find it, right? So how do I find our list item? Sorry, not our list item, our unordered list that's in our HTML. Yeah.
Document.get element by ID.
Document.getElementById.
So are we going to make the element equal to that?
We could do that. Yep. Document.getElementById. And then what do I put in parentheses? List. Okay. In quotations because it's a string. Okay, so we could set element equal to this if we want to. And all that does is it creates a reference, right? So elements are just substitutions, they're just aliases. Element is just then a thing that we can use to reference our list element. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Now we can do element dot append child.
Yep.
I would hope so now.
Yeah. So now we have our elements, and now we're going to append onto the element, which is our UL. We want to append what onto that?
Onto our LI. I mean UL.
So
oh, no,
We
our,
want to append the create task.
no. Blueberry.
blueberry. Yeah. So what we want to append is blueberry, right? So, which is our LI. Okay. And then we don't need this next line of code. Do we understand why we no longer need that?
No.
Okay. So what is, so let's go through it. What is line 2 doing?
It is setting searching the document for the element.
So line 2 is not,
It's creating the element.
Yes.
Live.
Yep. It's creating a list item and setting it equal to setting blueberry equal to what that list item is. Right? We're not searching the document. It doesn't exist in the document yet. We're creating a random variable. It could be yellow. It could be purple. It could be supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. It doesn't matter. It's just a name that we are putting on here. That was my point. So we could call it list item, right, to make it a little bit more readable. But it doesn't matter what we call it. It's just a variable. Okay. So if we call it list item, then this has to be list item, and this has to be list item.
Probably make things a little more confusing for us.
Yeah, which is like that's where blueberry. So when you're actually a developer, you understand all of this stuff. You name things in a way that is readable by people. So if I was writing this code, I would name it list item. But that's confusing, I think, to people who are learning because it feels like that's special. That like because you're naming it list item, it's a list item. That's not true. It's just some random thing that I'm making up. We can call it X. Okay. Okay, so line 2 is setting X equal to a new element that we're creating that is an LI tag. Okay, so then what is line 3 doing?
It is changing the inner HTML of that element to Hey Sam.
Yep, what was the inner HTML of that element before? Nothing. It's just blank. Okay, we just created the tags. There's nothing inside of there. Okay. So that's what line 3 does. Is it available at that? Can we see it anywhere in our HTML at that point?
No.
Why not?
Because you haven't
done anything.
You haven't talked about behavior yet.
Yeah, we haven't told the document that it should put the element inside of the HTML yet. Right now it exists in memory, it exists in JavaScript, but it hasn't actually been pushed into our HTML yet. Okay. What is line 4 doing?
Now,
hold on. So if we go back to line 2,
yep.
When we said create element, and then we were doing what with li?
We haven't really done anything. So far, right? So let's go back to the top. What is line 2 doing?
It is creating an element that's called X that has a list item tag.
Yeah, we're creating an element, which is to say that we are creating put simply, if we are creating this in memory.
We're creating a variable. X is a variable.
So X is a variable that is being set equal to an element that we're creating that is this. Okay? It's sort of shorthand because we just type li, but imagine that this is essentially turning into this. Okay. It's a little bit more complicated than that because the element is a document object model element. It's not just the text of the HTML. It has functions that we can call and attributes that we can set like inner HTML. Okay? But in general, you can think of it as, hey, when we do that, we created in memory a list item. Okay? We're setting this equal to X here. Okay? So then in the next line, line 3, what are we doing?
We are setting the inner HTML of that element to HTML.
Yeah, so if we think about this as being X, what does X now look like?
It has HTML.
Yeah, so now it's okay. All right. So then in line 4, what are we doing?
So we're now.
So let me go back again, and I've asked a couple times, but I'm asking again. So does this show up anywhere inside of our HTML at this point?
Not yet.
Not yet. Okay. So what is line 4 doing?
So we have an ID named list. So we're now finding the element associated with it.
Yeah. So the yes, that's correct. We are searching the document for an element that has an ID of list, okay? And we're then grabbing it, okay? And we're making it available to us. Okay, so element is essentially whatever element in here has an ID of list, which is our UL ID list. Right, so we can do a similar thing here. Okay. So that's our element. That's what element is, right? Okay. All right. So then what is line 5 doing?
And we're taking that element and adding whatever is on X.
Yeah, so what is X again?
X is the list item.
Yeah, so X specifically is the list item with Hey Sam in it, right? Because that's what we just did. This is X. And so we are appending onto element. What is element?
The element
UL.
This is element, right? So we are appending this onto this. So what is line 5 makes element now look like what?
Is it adding another L?
It makes it look like dot Hey Sam.
Yeah, so but in particular what's happening, right, is we are taking X, which is this, and we are appending it into the UL. So what we're really doing is we are taking this piece and we're moving it over here.
What is the dictionary definition of it to attach to?
To add to, yeah. Particularly to the end of. There's a prepend child too, which would put it at the front.
Gotcha. Yeah. Makes sense.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So what we're doing is we're taking this and we're appending it into this, appending a child. Okay. So, do we still need line 6? Is the original question.
Well,
So-
line 6. No.
No.
No. In fact, what would happen if we left line 6?
We would.
It would change it. It would search the document and change the inner HTML to the value of new task, which means
I don't know what it would do. Do the same thing twice.
I'm not sure.
Or error.
Okay.
New task is an ID.
Yep, new task was an ID, which was our input box, right? So this is saying search the document for an element with an ID of list, which is our list, right? Which is this. Okay. And it's saying set its inner HTML. So what's the inner HTML of that element right now?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, of our list element. So this is element, right? And we've set that, so that is actually in the HTML now because we called it append child. So now if we go and search the document for an element that has an ID of list, we find what? This UL, right? The whole thing. Okay, and then we're going to say now set its inner HTML. So what's the inner HTML of UL? What's the HTML inside of? I mean, it's pretty literal, right? What's the HTML inside of UL?
The list item.
The list item, the whole thing. So not just Hey Sam, but the list item too. So we're going to set the inner HTML equal to li document.getElementById by ID new task.value. What is document.getElementById by ID new task?
New task
It's
is
the
an
input
ID
box.
on the input box.
And so what's the value?
Whatever we put in there.
Whatever we put in there. So we are going to set the inner HTML, which we agree is this whole thing, to be a new li with the value of whatever we put inside of the input box, right? So if we leave this line of code, right? So we've set currently, look right here, and we can even prove it.
So if we leave it blank, it'd be blank, and if we put something in there, it would then change Hey Sam to whatever we put.
Yeah, right.
It's going to overwrite.
It's going to overwrite it. So we won't end up seeing Hey Sam, we'll end up seeing whatever we put into the input box. Okay. So we don't like that very much. So I'm going to comment it out. So any code that you comment out like that, it doesn't run. Okay, JavaScript just gets skipped. So if I do this, and then I can type whatever I want in, I get "Hey Sam," which that's not exactly what we want, but it's pretty close, right? But I do get, every time I click create, I get a new one. Okay.
And we still, that event listener is key with the click, right?
Say that again?
It's essential that we have that event listener, add event listener click for the function. Because if we didn't have that, if we just, so if we didn't have that and we just wanted to try to see if we remove that
Line 9.
line 9.
So let's just remove it and see what happens.
Nothing.
Why not?
Because you didn't tell it what to do.
Not calling the function.
We're not calling the function.
But if we just said say hello right now, what would it do? Would it console.log in?
Nope, it'll do exactly the same thing as though we were clicking the button.
But it'll run the function though in the background. We're just not putting it anywhere, right?
It just runs it. Yeah, it's just that we're not, so we can do it as many times as we want to, right? It just runs it immediately because it's just in the code immediately being called. As opposed to when we do click say hello, it's only when it gets clicked that it does it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll get into this being called as an anonymous function as a callback, and so there's some special things that are happening, but it's the same. It's all good. Okay, so we can either call it directly, or you can say, don't do it until I click on it. Okay, and that's valuable because that allows us to say, wait until I've changed my input box, and then I click the button before you actually add anything to the list. Okay, so now it says "Hey Sam," but I don't want it to say "Hey Sam," right? I want it to say the value of whatever our input button is. So what do I need to change to make that happen?
Do you need to change X to create task?
I would just take that "Hey Sam" and replace it with the document that I get that would
But you don't want it to say "Hey Sam" at all?
I don't want it to say "Hey Sam."
Oh.
You're right. So it's just about taking what we were doing before, right? So what is document.getElement by ID new task value?
Whatever we put in the input.
It's whatever we put in the input box, right? So now if we read back through this code, I know we just did this, but we're going to do it again. Line 2, what is line 2 doing?
It is setting the element to the list item.
So let's start by, so generally speaking, when you are reading anything that has an equal sign, start on the right and say what the right is doing. So let's just start there. So what is this part of the code doing?
In the document, we're going to create an element with the ID. No.
Nope.
We're going to create an element of a list item tag and name it X.
Yeah, we're going to create an element. And in particular, the type of element we're going to create is an LI, which is a list item.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to create, in our document object model, we're going to create a new element that's a list item. And then we're going to set that equal to X.
Okay.
So X is now an alias for a newly created element that is a list item. In other words, X is now this.
Yes. But how is this on the UL tag?
It's not.
Okay.
So all we've done right now is we said that there's a variable called X, and it is equal to an LI element.
Okay.
Okay? That's it. Nothing about you.
When you get LI, for instance, is that telling JS to look for HTML, or is that directly referencing HTML?
No, and none of that. So when you say document.createElementLI, it does nothing with the HTML.
Okay.
Not a single thing. All that it does is it creates an element in memory. Okay, so it's not in the document. It's not in our actual HTML. We are just in JavaScript. We are creating an element in memory that exists in the browser that it knows about that is a list item element like this. Okay, so let's just, look, we can debug right here. Okay, so we'll put a debugger there, refresh the page, we'll click create. Okay, at this point, X, if I type it, is LI. It's just a list item, right? But where is that list item inside of our HTML? You won't be able to find it because it's not there. So it is a list item. It's just as much a list item as a list item that we would have like written into HTML. But it does not exist in our HTML yet. Okay? All right. So if we continue forward, we're then...
Essentially, that document.create element is the document object model creating the element, but it's not in the document per se.
Yes, because we haven't appended the element into the HTML yet, or added the element into the HTML yet. We have just created it in memory. We haven't actually applied it to the HTML yet.
So pretty much that line, if you go back to the JS,
Yep.
if we're reading it from right to left, well, from the right of the equal sign, we're saying, hey, document, create an element, make it a list item element. And then we go to the left side and say, declare it as X.
Yeah, that's right. Yep. And then, yeah, so the way that I read this is pretty close to what you just said. Hey, document, create a list item element, and then I want to set that equal to a variable called X. So after you're done creating the element, I want you to set it equal to X. Okay.
Oh, at least we got line 2.
Yes, so line 2, step 1. Okay. So what is line 3 doing?
Line 3 is taking that element
Mm-hmm.
and changing, well, let's start on the right, searching the document to get the element by ID with the ID new task
Yep.
and its value.
Yep.
And then
Which is going to be what? So just like translate
what
that.
we input when we hit the button.
Well, so it's whatever is inside of the input box, right? It's whatever is inside of here because that our element new task is the input box. So there's nothing. I just want to be clear. It has nothing to do with the button, right? It's just whatever text happens to be there at that time. Okay. Okay. So yeah. So it goes and searches the document, finds our input box, which is a new task by its ID. It gets its value, and then
It changes the inner HTML of the element to that value.
Yep. And what is the element?
The element is the list.
The element is the list item that we created in memory from the document, right? It's X. Okay, cool. So then what is line 4 doing?
It's searching the document to get the element by ID with the ID of list.
Yep, which is, in our case, what is that element?
The UL.
The UL, the unordered list, yep. And then,
And then it is adding on to that.
well, but before that even, so you describe this part of it. And then it's setting that element to be the variable element, right? Which could just as well be whatever,
Yeah.
right? But we're setting a variable to that element.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So, and then what is line 5 doing?
Adding on to that element the element that we created, the list item.
Mm-hmm.
And it's adding the list item on to the UL.
Yep. And what does that list item look like again? So like it's this, but what's inside of here?
The HTML, which we set to the value.
Which is
The value of
the value of the input box. That's right. Cool. Everybody gets that? All right, so let's give that a refresh. Cool? Okay. So, what we're going to do next is, before we get into the actual labs, I want you to do this yourself. So, what I want to do is we're going to open up our terminal. We're going to get into learning Git 2. Okay, so that is going to be, so to do that, we're going to cd space tilde /code /learning get 2. And then if we type pwd, we should see that we're in something like /user/ the name of your computer /code /learning-get 2. Okay. And then I want you to type get status. Get add and commit and push if you have anything. So if you see any changes, modifications, so if anything is red, then you want to get add dot get commit -m and then in parentheses a message, and then get push origin, the name of your branch, which you should see.
What branch should we be on? I'm on the box model branch.
You're on the box 1 branch. If you type get status, what does it say?
It says working tree clean. But
Cool. So so you don't have to do these pieces is all.
Okay.
You don't have to add commit and
But
push.
does it matter what branch you're on?
Yes, but we're going to change branches in just a second. So once you get to that point, then Shikari, you will want to follow along with this. So we want to get checkout master.
I'm sorry, what brand did you say you wanted to?
Well, I haven't yet.
Oh,
So, but get checkout master first, and then when you're on master, then we want to get checkout -b your name -to do. And if that's not working, just let me know so we can walk through it.
What was the last part you said?
So let's see. Yeah, looks pretty good. So get checkout space -b. So I'm just going to check out a new branch space your name -to do. Yeah, that's fine. Yep. Enter. Okay. So then you just want to open up Learning get 2 in Atom. And then open up the index.html in your browser, which should just be double clicking on it from the Finder.
Yeah,
Okay. And then we just want to recreate this. So you should have an input box, you should have a button, you should have a list, and you want to make it so that when you type into the input and then click on the button, it makes your new list item show up. So we'll spend the next 30 minutes or so doing that. If at any point you start to get stuck, reach out to classmates, to me, whatever. Don't, because this is such a short exercise, if you're stuck for more than 5 minutes, like you're searching and you can't find anything, call me over.
you guys want pizza at all? There's a bunch of pizza. I think it's fine.
Thank you.
I just want to make sure everybody got, like, you are in a good state, like you can actually see your browser and it's blank or whatever. And,
Yes.
okay, cool.
I haven't even viewed it. I was just in the HTML.
What's that?
I haven't even viewed the browser. I'm just in my HTML.
Just messing around with something. I presume you know how to get there.
Oh yeah.
And do you know how to open up the browser, get the index.html to show up in the browser and code from there?
Like in the DOM or
Just, yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, I just want to make sure you're in a good state to start developing. So, I would recommend that you open up your inspector as soon as possible.
So just right click on the browser and then click inspect. It'll be useful later.
It's my favorite pizza. Local pizza.
How do you comment things out in HTML?
Have you
Comment things out in HTML.
it's like open caret thing, exclamation point, dash dash, and close it with dash dash other, like greater than sign.
pizza.
It's good, man. Yeah. And so, by the way, you can also cheat on this, right? Like search, and if you find code that works, just copy and paste it. There's no.
And that takes away from the learning, Sam.
I don't know if it does like that. That's real life. That's what I do too.
I say we try it hard, and then if we need a lifeline, we Google the lifeline and keep going.
Yep.
The whole answer is.
Did we put an ID on the thing? Yes.
There it is.
Oh. Hey Chen, can you text me your correction? You have your board card on? They changed the security stuff again, so my card doesn't work in the elevator either. So Aaron's gonna fix mine. I asked her if she could fix yours at the same time. So
Cool. Thank you.
Just that look. I've had that look so many times.
Let's throw some new luggage in here.
Yeah, there you go. Now we're talking.
There.
So we just finished the last scene. We didn't put the listen click. Listen for the click.
We do have a listen for a click
Okay.
on the button.
Don't make this supposed to not have a listen for the click. I'm sure my code is wrong, but also.
So I think part of the problem here is that it's your search term. So when you say create a list in JavaScript, list in this, yeah, task a search. So it's just pretty stuff.
If they didn't have the click, this is that.
It's probably there. Here you go, ready to list out of the add event list and then click. And then, so what they're doing, so we define what's called an anonymous function, which is to say we just put the name of the function and then we write the function somewhere else. They're just writing the function in the line, which is okay. It's just a different way of doing it.
Okay. I think that this is wrong.
You're not far. So tell me what line 2 is going to do.
It's going to create a element in the document with a list.
It's going to create a list item element in our document object model, so in memory. And it's going to set item equal to that element. And then what's line 3 going to do?
It's going to search the document to get element by ID with the element of the ID in my input. And it's going to get that element's value.
Which is,
Rapid.
and what is the value of that element?
Whatever we type.
Yep. It's going to set that to input value. And then what is line 4 doing?
It's going to create an element in the document. Creating an element in the document.
Nothing properly. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and then what is li at this point?
It is the element recreated.
Is it?
Up here.
Is it that? Because, so what is li right there?
It is,
It's nothing.
it's nothing.
And the
there.
reason it's nothing, you're really close, right? But what we've done here is we created an li element, but we set it equal to item. I think what you want there is item,
Okay.
but you don't actually want item. So the first thing we need to do, right, so you have your item, you've created it, it exists in memory, we basically have the li right there, and it actually has whatever the value is. But now we need to find our ul, right? So how do we find our ul?
Well, let's see if I have a ID of UL is my UL. So,
Yep.
so if we had document but we just want to find it.
So and then what we're gonna want to do is add item or list item into the UL, right? In other words, we want to append a child to it, which is to say we want to put inside of it, so nest inside of it an li. And so the way that we do that, you can say element equals that, or el equals that, or something equals that, so that we have a variable to reference.
Okay.
And then we're going to say el dot append child. So just to be clear, what is el again?
It is what we're adding to the UL. It's a list item that we're adding to the UL.
No, so el is our ul. See, because what we're doing here, right, is we're searching the document for an element with an ID of my ul, which is your ul. And we're setting that equal to el.
Okay.
So el is your ul.
Okay.
So then el dot append child, what do we want to append as a child of the ul?
The new list item.
A new list item, which is what?
Which is the line
What's
or item.
item. Yeah. Okay. So that's the function that you need. But now you need to somehow call that function. So one way to just test this out, just press enter and type new element and like call new element. Good. So now if you refresh your page, so the problem is that there won't be anything there because you don't have value. So go back over here. Oh, okay.
So is it going to be right here?
It won't be yet. And there's a couple of reasons for that. So one is you get the input value, but you never modify your list item element to have whatever the value is be between it. So, let me see. Okay, so you call a new element there. Let's go look at your browser again. If you look at your elements, make this stuff a little bit bigger. Bring it back this way. Just click and start dragging. Maybe it'll just do it. Alright, and then we want to make this a little bit bigger so we can actually see the elements. So I think you want to grab it like right above the event listeners. Down. Okay, so now if you click in body, scroll down a little bit. Alright, so there's UL. So we didn't actually append our LI in, and we should have. So something's wrong. So if we go back to your code, first place to start is just put a debugger into the function.
So
yeah, so right there, click and then press enter and put a debugger right there. Yeah, and then refresh the page. Okay, so it never hits our debugger, which suggests to me that the index.js probably isn't included in your index.html. Yeah, so it's hard for it to do anything before that. So if you go into your index.html, at the bottom, before body, do script source. Yeah. So if you refresh now. There we go. So it actually gets into a function. That's good. So if you press go, so there's our list item. So it created the list item, but the list item doesn't have any value in it yet.
okay.
So we can go.
And if I was to move this UL up above the hood instead of weight,
And the reason it won't work is because when the browser loads, well, yeah, so when the browser loads, it's going to go from top to bottom, right? So it's going to say, so if you move script to
no,
up,
not script, the UL.
oh, if you move the UL, yeah, yeah, you can,
Oh.
yep.
Okay.
So if you move your debugger down a couple lines, so move it, yeah. So using G's. Okay, so you can, and you leave both of them. So we just save that. And then refresh the page. Okay. So you're just at the top, that's fine. Click on the big blue button there. Okay, so you get to the second one. If you type item or you scroll over item, put your mouse over item, this item right here. So that gives us a whole bunch of information about what item is. If you just type item into the console, it'll tell you what item really is. Press enter. So that's our list item, right? But our list item doesn't have any text in it. So the problem is, even though we're creating a list item, we haven't actually changed the HTML inside of the list item yet. So how do we do that?
We want to set the items inner HTML
Yep.
to this.
Yep. Which is the same as input value, because you set the variable equal to that.
Okay.
So you can just replace the debugger.
So items.
Well, close. We want to change the items what?
Inner
There you
HTML
go. Yep.
is input value.
Yep. Okay, cool. Saves it. Refresh. It's okay, click back and refresh. Okay, click the big blue button. So, but it worked though, is the thing. Because the value of your input box is nothing.
Okay. So if it was something.
But you won't be able to get to that state.
Okay, because I did put the listener.
Correct. So if so delete the debugger so it stops being annoying. So if instead of just calling it, if you had it listen for a click before it's called,
Okay.
then it would go. So how do you do that? So the first thing is we want to click on the button. So we need to get access to the buttons element. So how do we do that?
Okay, so create tabs. So I'm not still in.
You're not still in the function because you're going to call the function from outside of it.
Okay, so document that.
Dash task. Okay, so that gets us, we search the element, we find the create task, and then what are we going to do?
Event listener.
But event listener is what we need to do is add an event listener. So
What is it?
So it's add event listener.
Okay. Like that?
Mm-hmm. And then
Value.
open parentheses. And what type of event listener do we want it to be?
Text. The click.
Click. Yep. And then wait a second. So so what is click right there?
Is the behavior. Is what we want to do.
So click is what we want it to do, but that right there is a variable.
Oh yes. So we want
Yep. And then comma. So the second parameter is the behavior inside the function. And then that's the behavior, which is new element. And then delete. think that's going to do it. Cool. Yeah. That's it.
We'll keep going.
Sam, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I thought I wrote this to perfection.
Shannon, me too, buddy. I heard you running and grinding over
All
here.
right, so this is what I started with
Yep.
from here.
So first of all,
I just knew that it wasn't here.
I know. So there's a couple things. You pretty much never want to use a form when you use JavaScript because it creates weird behaviors. So remember when we went over the form stuff before, when you create a form and you do an action of index HTML and a post, when you click that submit button, it's going to reload your page. So you don't want to do that. So we want to get rid of all that form crap. You also generally don't want to use input of type submit. You could use input of type button, or you can use a button instead of. But yeah, just use it. And then delete that form.
So do I need that item? I still need that item, right?
The item.
Yeah. I mean, the
ID, yes. Yeah. That might have been my problem.
That might be. Alright, so create a function.
Yep.
Alright, document create an element of the list item variety, big blue, HTML in blue, it's going to be the same of the inches value enter. It's from there, should that not be?
Nope, that's all.
Regular element is from the list. ID, that's from over here.
Yep.
Alright, and then up in that child to blue. That's it. Button.
Yeah, so you're really adding blue to that. Yep. And then you say indicate element by ID button. You have a capital secret click. That might be all those.
It better not be.
Okay, so here's the thing though, like to help you find those types of problems.
So my debugger kept saying event listener null, add event listeners values null or something.
Yeah,
like that.
because it was probably saying there is no capital C click events.
So I googled what the null was and I really didn't
Yeah,
get
so
what it was
if you can grab the whole message, you're usually best off. Like, can't find event listener null. If you copy that whole thing, you probably would have gotten. So we can try. Let's try it real quick so we can inspect so we can see it. Yeah, change it back to capital C. And then inspect so we can see the error refresh. So refresh. Let's go to the console. Click on it. Back to the console. Oh. It could have been something else that we fixed. Okay, but if you get to this point, it's like, what the hell is going on? The first step you probably want to do is go back to your code. And you want to put a debugger instead on the first line of the function. So,
right
yeah.
here.
And the reason is you're just trying to see, does this function ever get called? Because if it doesn't ever get called, then there's absolutely something wrong with Lenny. See what I'm saying? If it does get called, then you can start to work through what the problem is in the function. So it never gets called because it would have taken you to the debugger.
Okay.
But it doesn't. So if we go back and fix it, but leave the debugger in, you'll see what it means. See how it stops and it takes you there? So the fact that you weren't getting in here before would have given you a pretty good idea there's something on this line that you're
Right.
cool. Yeah, you did it.
Okay, so I have a couple questions.
Yep.
So I think something that I am a little bit struggling with, all of these things like item, input value, they don't have to be in HTML. I just make them up here and I use them here.
So item is not an HTML, you just make it up here.
Yeah.
Input value is in HTML.
It is
Well, so what is input value?
the value of the input button.
Yeah, of the input text. So if we go back to index.js, right? When we read this, we're saying, I'm going to set a variable. So variables, yeah, you make up entirely. The word item, the word input value, you're making them up.
Yes.
Right? And you're setting a variable that you called input value equal to, well, let's search through the document and find an element with an ID of my input, which is in your HTML, and then grab its value.
Right. But that's for the words item and input value.
Yeah.
I just made them up.
Because they're variables, yes. Because you're
Okay.
just making them up.
Okay. I think like I'm always thinking that I need to see those things also in HTML.
Yeah. Nope.
Okay.
Remember when we first started doing all the JavaScript stuff, we didn't do anything in HTML, right? We were still creating variables and doing whatever we wanted.
Okay.
JavaScript works completely independent of HTML. It's just sometimes we want to interact with the HTML, which is where we do things like document. Basically anywhere you see document, we are interacting with the HTML.
In here, with new element.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this says in document there is an element with ID create task.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to listen for the click.
Yep.
And then
When it's clicked, call my new element function.
call my new, which is up here.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Yep. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, so you could change this to Bluebird, and this to Bluebird, and it's still.
Okay. There was something else, but I can't remember.
So I do want to show you guys one more thing, and then you can keep working on your to-do task, and I can come help you out, see where you are. Or you can work on the labs for the rest of the time. But before you get to the labs, I want to make sure we go over to conditionals, which is the purpose, which is the main topic actually for today. Okay, so if we go back, let's see. Gotta love the conditionals, man. Let me check out my branch again.
Should we save this?
Yeah, so if you want to, you can save everything and then push it to your GitLab branch, and it'll be there for you. And then once you push it to your GitLab branch, you can check out master again. Okay. Oh, whoops. Well, Chin, what did you call your branch? Did you push it already, or
No.
can you push it? Because I lost my code and I want to start with something that's more.
Okay.
And if you don't remember how, just
Oh
like-
yeah, I know.
Okay.
Okay, we check
I just don't want people to feel embarrassed. Like, I don't know. If you don't know how to do it, it's fine.
Are we checking out a new branch?
What's that?
Are we checking out a new branch?
No, you can stay there. I was just saying, if you want to save it, if you want it to exist somewhere, then make sure that you add commit and push it to your branch so that it's on GitLab. Okay. What- Yours is on there? What did you name it? Okay.
Dash to do.
Okay. Okay. Oh, there they are right there. So, why is it not? Okay, there we go. Why are you? Oh, I know it. I know what's going on. I have 2 copies of this on my computer. Okay, there we go. So this is where it's giving me errors on the lets, but they're not real errors, they're just syntax things. Because you never redefine item or input value, it wants them to be constants. That's
Just
what
let us only if you plan on changing it.
Yeah, let's only
So
if
until you
you
change it, it's going to always have that.
Yeah, so until you change, it's always going to be constant, which is why it's kind of funny because, like, in the end, if you make a change, you probably intend to make that change because you're writing your code, so you're going to go back up and change it from a const to a let. But anyway.
So you should just think you should have at least 2 lets before it'll remove the error message pretty much.
What's that?
So if you have 1 let, it's going to always have, as soon as you put that second let in there,
So you'll never
variable, it'll remove it.
So you'll never do let again. So it's more like, so item currently is set to a new element that we're creating that's a list item. If I want to set item instead to be a new element that is a div, it's going to start complaining, and if I put my cursor over, it'll tell me why. It says that I'm attempting to assign a constant variable. What you have to do is change this initial instantiation to a let.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So you don't ever have to say let again.
You never have to say let again. Yeah.
Never happened with bar.
What's that?
You wouldn't do that with bar.
Nope, it wouldn't do that with var, and it wouldn't do it if you don't put anything either, which is also totally fine.
Stay faithful to bar.
Yep. All right, so we created this list item thing. That's Shikar's version, which works great, and it's got like a nice little header and stuff, but still works, does the thing it's supposed to do, which is awesome. Okay, but
Mine has dots.
yeah, I
On
don't
my computer.
know why it would not. Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't have them. But yeah, sure, they should have dots. But the point is, if I have an empty item like this, oh, actually, that's fun. How does it know not to create?
Yeah, mine, and then it gives me another order list number.
That's what I was expecting to get. I'm not sure why that's not. Let me try to check yours out, Chen.
Is it because there's an order? Oh, it should have the dot still, right?
Yours is doing it? I didn't do anything. Okay, well, whatever.
Maybe you already have like.
Oh, what is this nonsense about? Maybe it's that. Hold on. What is going on? No, hold on. Okay, I don't know, weird. Okay, so if I create a blank item, right, it does this, and we don't want to do that, presumably, right? So, how do we make it so that if our input value is blank, we don't add the item? So in other words, we only want to add the item if our input value is not blank. If is the right starting point.
If item.
Okay. First of all, tell me where to start my if.
Yeah, under the function.
Okay, we can start. So like right here, first line.
No.
I mean, I don't know. You tell me.
After all of that, you have to have the function, right? first. You have to
Well-
have it to put a conditional statement on
Yep. But we can put conditionals inside of a function.
it. Okay.
That's totally fine.
Okay, so there. So we're on line 2. So if
Bracket. Space bracket.
Yes, but it's
Oh no. You want to start calling what we say what the if is. So if we have to put the actual conditional in there. So if
what are we talking about? Item?
the item, right?
so if the item
Go back. Move that out of the way. If I was gonna say
Yeah, if
input value. Because essentially we want the box, the space, so that'll be the dot value, which is now equal to the variable that input value.
Yep, because we want to know if the input box's value is blank or not, right? So we want to start with input value.
Yes, if input value
Is equal to
Yeah, how do I do that?
two of those bad boys. Now, how do you say if something's in there or blank? I don't know.
So that checks if it's blank.
So does that mean blank or does that mean something's in it?
That means blank because there's nothing inside of it. This would mean has a space. This would mean has 2 spaces. Those would mean have 3 spaces. This would mean
Okay.
has 4 spaces and then the letter W.
Okay, so if it is blank,
So if blank,
So if you want to keep all that right there, couldn't we just say not blank?
what's that?
If it's not,
So we could say not blank,
which is an exclamation point,
which
right?
is an exclamation point.
That would keep all that right there. So if it's not blank, then do what we usually do.
Yeah, so how do I do what we usually,
return,
we don't need to return,
Just open brackets.
open curly braces.
Oh, yeah, open brackets.
Right, remember curly braces tell us execute all the code inside of here based on what is outside. So this is saying if the input value does not equal blank, then do all of this code.
Mhm.
Okay.
This is going to break though. You know why? It's really close. What is input value right here?
Input value there is the value of the element of ID, right? Input.
Remember, how does the computer read a JavaScript file?
Oh, from top to bottom. So
From top to bottom. So what is input value on line 2?
it's not
It's
defined.
nothing.
It's nothing. So where do we need to move this?
So we need to move it after line 4.
Yeah, after input
Oh, I
value.
see what you're saying.
See, so now it is something. Okay. So we can do that. So now, if it's nothing, nothing happens, but if it's something, something happens.
So we don't need the else in this case.
You don't need the else in this case
We
because
automatically assume the else.
you don't have to have an else. That's
Great.
right. Yep. Okay, so that works pretty well. But here's the thing, and I started showing this a little bit earlier. What if I put a space in and then submit it? Or 2 spaces, or 3 spaces. We also probably don't want to create a new task, it's just spaces, right? So how do I deal with that?
We could have said, if, well, do we want to do an else or do we want to do an if?
Actually, we want to keep the same if.
Same if.
So here's what I'm going to suggest. So Google search for remove all empty spaces from a string JavaScript.
Is Stack Overflow more popular than W3 schools?
Yes. So W3 Schools is a great place to go and like initially learn because it has tutorials and stuff. Stack Overflow is when you're actually doing work and you want to find the solution to a problem. They have a lot more insight.
Okay. Let's see. this one. Oh, it's saying something about alert.
No, so an alert is a thing that like pops up. I can show you what an alert does. So if you type in alert input value, for example, then when we click it, this is an alert.
Is it something to do with forward slash and backslashes?
No. Remove empty spaces from string JavaScript. It's literally this word right here. That's what I'm looking for. So if I click on this, so you're probably there.
She's there, yeah.
Yeah, so you see this is saying var string equals a whole bunch of spaces and then the word hello world and then a whole bunch more spaces, right? And what they're saying, and you can, the try it yourself feature is huge, right? So like, just click into there, let's just see what happens, right? So if I click try it, I'm going to get an alert that says hello world, right? If I don't trim, if I just alert string, so alert a lot of times is used as a debugging thing. We use console.log, but a lot of times people will use alert in the same way so they can see what's actually happening. So if I just do string and don't do string.trim, then you see the like extra spaces that are happening here and here. Okay. So what does that tell us about how to remove empty spaces from a string? Remember, here we're removing the empty spaces by doing the string.trim, right? So
input value.trim.
Input value.trim.
Alert.
Alert doesn't matter. Alert is just creating that box pop up.
Yeah, you're right.
Right?
So where did you put it?
Yep. So if input value.trim, so if input value after we get rid of all the extra spaces doesn't equal blank. Okay. And so
we assumed a lot of things because we may know it or we may have read ahead or anything like that, but just to kind of take a step back.
Yep.
With the if, so we're putting the if inside of our function. One thing I think I always miss is that we have another set of curly braces, so we have to remember to close that and close the function as well.
Yes.
And then also the equals to, a lot of times the variables we're used to using one equal sign.
Yep.
If you want to say equals in that sense, we're using 2 or 3, right?
So yes, it's about comparison or setting. So when you want to set a variable, so I am setting item equal to document. Here I am comparing if trim is equal to a value. So it's about setting or comparing. When you're setting, you use a single equal sign. When you're comparing, you use 2 or 3.
And the exclamation point is not.
Is not.
Okay. So
Okay, so there's another issue that we're still going to run into here. What if I type space, what if I type a bunch of spaces before and after my list item? When I click submit, oh, it takes it away.
Most of it is not working.
Sam did it.
Not into it. Okay, but so one of the things that you can end up running into, or not for some reason, is that because the value actually has those extra spaces, it'll show up with extra spaces in your code. So what we probably want to do is not do the trim here. We probably want to do the trim here. So where as soon as we take the value, we get rid of all the spaces, and then input value is whatever is inside of our text box minus the spaces that are around.
Makes sense.
I think I remember that's something to delete
Yeah. So I think, yeah, uncaught syntax error, unexpected identifier. If you go back, I bet you're missing, it's what a couple things. So get rid of this if item, because that's bad syntax. So we're going to let that. And then, if input value dot trim does not equal an item error, so you probably want to close that guy right before you close your function. So you probably want to delete that and then close it right before you close the function. So basically, yep. Yep. So before, after that.
After this?
Yeah.
So now this one.
So this one closes your function. So you see how the function opens there and it closes here?
Okay.
So this one that you're creating is closing your if statement. We're just saying, I don't want to do any of the things inside of here if the input value is blank.
Okay.
Trim also is a function, so you have to call it. So that part fixes it. Yep.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
All right. So that's what conditionals are. They're just a way for us to say, I only want to do this set of code if something. And if we want to, we can say otherwise. So I'm going to do this quickly just so we can see, but I'm going to create a div with an ID of errors. And I'm going to say, otherwise, if there's errors, document.getElementById errors. I'm going to set its inner HTML to the task item. The task cannot be blank. Right, so if they try to send us something that isn't blank, I'm going to remove the trim so that it's not always blank. So now if they try to send us something that's blank, they'll get an error, otherwise they get the real value. Now the problem here is we're always displaying the error. After you do it the first time, it's always going to display the error. It won't display it until then. But if we wanted to remove that, then we could say, so when we are successfully giving a good thing, set the inner HTML back to blank. See that? So that's basic form validation right there. One more thing before I let you guys go back to it. After I add an item each time, you see how it stays there?
Mm-hmm.
I probably don't want that. How do I clear the value of the input? We did this a little bit earlier. Remember when we had the value being set to li hello world, and we saw that the value of the input box actually changed to be hello world? How did we do that? I don't remember.
Do you want to clear the input field with the button?
I want to clear the, sure. I want to clear the input field
When you click the button.
when I click the button.
Okay.
Yep.
So in HTML,
Yep.
on the button tab,
Yep.
you can add one click
Yep.
equals quotations document.getElementById, the parameter name by input,
Yep.
dot value,
Yep.
set it equal to the space.
blank quotes.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes. So here we've already gotten document by ID value, right? We actually, I'm not 100% sure this is going to work, but we might be able to just say input value equals blank. Don't know why. It's probably not going to let me do that, is what that means. But we'll give it a shot. Yeah, okay. So, well, we should absolutely be able to take this, which is what you were saying, Chicago. But. Cool? Yep. Just to be clear, I literally do what you said, though. So, but yeah, it's just document.getElement by ID my input dot value and send it equal to blank. A blank string. Cool. So we're pretty close, right? I mean, that is almost what a to-do list is like. So you guys are like this close to building Trello and becoming billionaires. Maybe a little more work, but I think hopefully this is starting to make a little bit more sense. It's still, I'm sure, will take a little while, but
It's better than before.
yeah. And that's what we're looking for. Just looking for improvement, not expertise. And the only way to get there is to just keep trying. So keep putting the time in, keep asking questions, ask as many questions as you can, and we'll get through it.
So we don't meet on Monday because it's going this
Oh, really? Okay. Cool. Yeah, we don't meet on Monday.
So what should we have done then?
So let me open up so you should finish week 5 and then read as much of week 6 as you can.
Have you still been streaming live?
I'm streaming right now. Yep.
When I know things, I'm going to come back and watch these and listen to all of my questions.
Yeah. Just be like, look at how much I learned. So you can definitely read through the Git stuff. This works out great because then we're going to get back into our regular schedule. So on Monday we will do week 6, day 1, and then on Wednesday we'll go to that does get us back off schedule again because of the wait. Yeah.
We're still behind.
Oh no, we're good. So Wednesday, so we're not meeting on Monday. So on Wednesday we'll meet and we'll do week 6, day 1, and then on the following Monday we'll skip to week 7. So we won't do week 6, day 2 because week 6, day 2 is Git again. So we already did that a while ago.
So what do we need
Have assignments about Git?
There are some assignments, but there's no like real tests on those assignments. So you don't, there's only so much you can get out of it. But you should read through it again to give yourself additional familiarity.
So we should do
I just put it up, so you have to refresh the page.
real objects and instructions and intermediate.
Is this good?
So it should be week 6.
Mm-hmm.
If you scroll. Oh, that's. Scroll now.
That's it.
No. What?
Oh, I don't know. I don't see any of that.
Maybe
I don't see. Do y'all see Git on yours?
Yeah, I see it.
refresh the page again. Maybe it just didn't finish deploying when you.
Control Git and Git that.
Yes.
Cool.
Got it. Okay, so we should go through intermediate JavaScript.
Go through intermediate JavaScript, and I mean I would read the Git stuff too. I just don't know that you need to do the labs. we did the Git in class lesson like day 2 or something, right? So
Okay, so finish week 5, practice JavaScript, and go through intermediate.
and read through intermediate. Yep.
Okay.